Hi, I'm Darrin Peppard. Welcome to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, the podcast dedicated to today's hardworking leader. Join me every Sunday for leadership insight, inspiration, and a little pep talk to keep you rolling down your road to awesome. Hey there, and welcome into episode 61 of the Leaning into Leadership podcast, where today my guest is Michelle Osterhoudt. Michelle is a wife, she's a mom, she's a 24-year career educator, and she's a community leader. Michelle is active in her community, serving as the vice president of the local chapter of the NAACP. She has been a city council member, and she is currently the seated superintendent for Margaretville Central School District. Michelle and I had an amazing conversation recently, and we talked a lot about what does it take to support new leaders in new roles. We had a wonderful conversation about the value of coaching. We had an awesome conversation about school culture and about how we never, ever give up on a kid. Michelle's got a very powerful story that you won't want to miss, and you're going to hear it all right on the other side of these messages. Hey leaders, let's talk about school culture and professional development. What if we stop telling teachers what to do and instead invite them to sit side by side with us to solve the challenges we're all faced with? I'm talking about difficult parents. I'm talking about blame, outside pressures, and disengaged learners. School culture is critical, and I've got the formula to help you build the culture where everyone feels seen, heard, valued, and trusted. No more boring PD. Let's have PD that inspires and empowers our staff and gets everyone working together toward a common mission. I look at what we do here at Road to Awesome as human development because this type of work, this type of learning, hey, it goes beyond the classroom. It goes beyond the parking lot, beyond the bus and the lunch line. This carries into your community. I was in a school district recently, and after the work was complete for the day, one of the district employees pulled me aside and said, "Darrin, we have to have you back again. This work is every bit as important as working on instructional strategies or diving into our data. We cannot forget the human side of our work, and that's what you brought today. Thank you." Hey, reach out to me today and let's schedule a conversation for you to share your triumphs and your challenges. Hey, we're all in the people business. And here at Road to Awesome, we want to help you get the most out of your people. Email me at darrin@roadtoawesome.net or go to roadtoawesome.net and hit the contact us button. And now, on with today's episode.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get on to the episode.
All right, Michelle Osterhoudt, thank you for joining me here on Leading into Leadership. Definitely been looking forward to this conversation and continuing a conversation actually that you and I had about a week ago. So welcome in, my friend. How are you?
I am awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I'm so happy that we get to do this and continue the conversation, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like you and I were talking just before I hit the record button, it's incredible the power of social media and our ability to connect with people. You know, you're somebody I didn't really know a few weeks ago. And, you know, now here we are sitting down having this conversation on the podcast. So super excited about that. Really quick, Michelle, just for people who don't know who you are, just give them a real quick rundown of who you are, what you're doing, and where you come from.
Sure. Well, Michelle Osterhoudt. I am from the Southern Tier region of New York State. I live in Oneonta. I am the superintendent of Margaretville Central School District, a beautiful little town in the Catskills, really, right? We border Catskill Park. And I have been doing this for about, let me look at my watch, since August. So I'm a brand new superintendent. Before that, I was an elementary principal for 4 years. Before that, I was an assistant principal of a high school. And before that, for 16 years, I was a teacher. More importantly, I'm a mom and a wife. I have a son who's going to be 21 next month, a daughter who's 15, and a husband who puts up with me because I'm sort of a workaholic. Always wanting to learn. So.
Yeah, as most superintendents tend to be, that workaholic thing right there. Maybe we'll get to that a little bit too. So really quick, so you said some things in there that I want to maybe dig a little deeper into. So elementary principal, assistant principal at a high school. Then you mentioned your teaching experience. At what grade levels were you teaching as a classroom teacher?
I was an English teacher, grades 7 through 12. Started in high school for the first 3 years, and then the remainder, like 15 years or so, was middle school and high school. Middle school I started at. High school I started at, then I was middle school, high school. So I've done every single grade level English teacher, 7 through 12.
That's
and
wonderful.
Loved it.
I loved
every minute of it.
Yeah.
And when I was a high school teacher, I swore I'd never be a middle school teacher, and loved that when I went to middle school.
It's usually the way that works. It does. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You look in the eyes of middle school teachers and there's something not quite right there. And I was one of them. I mean, I say that like because I can. That's actually where I started. And, my thought was obviously, what led me in that direction. And, kind of part of my origin story was, wanting to be a head basketball coach. And so to me, it was, so I'm going to teach, at the high school level. I have a secondary school education background in science, that's what I want to focus on. But yeah, my first job, I spent 5 years teaching at the junior high level, and I loved it. I really, really loved middle school. Now, I can't imagine going from high school back down to middle school, but that had to be an interesting transition,
I swore I'd never do it, but I was newly married, pregnant with my son. We lived in the town. So, I worked in one town, lived in another. And when the position opened up in the town that I lived in, which was my hometown, it was sort of a no-brainer. Like, okay, I had a great experience here, but I'm going to be closer to home so I don't have the commute and I could be a young new mom. And I swore I'd never be in middle school, and I loved it. There's just something about middle school kids. They still want to please the teacher. They're still very impressionable. And I just loved it. I love the energy, and I'm energetic. That's one of the things people say when they first meet me. And this is really how I am. I love life. I loved teaching. I loved getting kids excited about learning. So it was kismet when I went down to the middle school, and I stayed there for a long time.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you're a new superintendent. Let's talk about that a little bit. I remember my early transition into being a superintendent, and for me, I think you and I talked about this last week when we were on visiting. But for me, I went from being a high school principal, a school of almost 1,500 students, a school with probably 150 what I call staffalty, so staff and faculty, and went into a district where, I would see more kids before I got to my office at the high school than there were in my entire district. I had 425 kids in a community of only about 2,000. So I know for you, you're in a smaller community. Let's maybe talk a little bit about your transition from where you were a principal to now being a superintendent, and maybe even just some of the size changes for you.
Yeah. So my last job before this, principal of a grades 3, 4, and 5, so intermediate school. And we had roughly 400 kids in that school. So imagine in charge of 400 kids, about 60 staff, going to a school district that's pre-K through 12, 330 kids, right? So I have less kids in the entire district than I had in grades 3, 4, and 5 in my old district. I was, the intermediate school. We had an elementary school, middle school, and a high school. So it's one building. So, and that was really the draw for me because I just value getting to know people and relationships. At the end of the year, I want to be able to say that I know pretty much everybody and I know kids and their names. And that was really important to me. And that's what it was like in my elementary school, a little bit bigger, but that was definitely a draw. And I'm from this area, so, close to home, the Catskill region of New York, which is a very beautiful, picturesque region, but very different because I'm not going to say that I worked harder as a principal. It's not harder. It's a different type of work.
Right.
A smaller school district, you have, people who do many jobs. A bigger
Oh,
school
yeah.
district, people have sort of like a designated role or job, but I'm the
Yeah.
superintendent. I'm the director of transportation. I may soon be the director of facilities. That's just
Yep.
how it is here. And I come from a district where you had people that did just those jobs. So that's,
Yeah.
that's provides even more of a learning curve that I have to sort of, get over. It's not just superintendent. You are many things in a small district.
Right. Yeah. So that's really where I want to go to with just wearing all the different hats. And, I think a lot of times people think of the superintendent and, that's the person with the really shiny shoes and the suit and, and there's, all these different things that they do. But most superintendents work in more, district sizes like yours, like the one where I was. And, it was amazing to me. So where I was a high school principal, we had 7 secretaries at the high school. And then I go to this district, and in the whole district, we had 4. 2 at our K-8, 1 at the high school, and then my secretary. In the district where I was a principal, like you said, I mean, we had a director of technology, and we had a director of curriculum, and a director of special ed, and a director of this, that, and the other thing. Our district office was 3 people. My secretary, the HR finance director, and me. And yes, I had a facilities director, and yes, I had a transportation director and a tech director, but they also wore a lot of other hats. So I guess I'm curious, maybe, let's talk about that a little bit, because to me, that was just such an interesting change. I mean, you just mentioned you're in charge of transportation. I mean, how much of that did you know as a principal? How much of that was like, oh my gosh, all new learning here?
It is. So, as a principal, my big thing was I never left the building until I knew all my kids were home, right? Very rarely was I not in the building not leaving the building before I knew that everybody was safely at home. And if it wasn't me, if I couldn't be there, then there was someone else who was designated to do that. But they would still call me, right? If a kid was missing, he was never missing. They just got off on the wrong stop. They would still call me even if I wasn't at work. So it went from that to just everything. I mean, my head bus driver doesn't make a decision or doesn't even answer an email without consulting me first. As a principal, I just wanted to make sure kids were safe, but I wasn't responsible for the bus routes. I wasn't responsible for the stops. Right. If somebody had a transportation problem in it, it usually was the director of transportation or the head bus driver. I didn't have to deal with a lot of issues. And you'd think that maybe we would, because we did bus a lot of students, but it was just a well-oiled machine. So coming into this position and, being responsible for a lot more, it's just me learning. I feel very fortunate because even though we all wear many hats here, there's been a lot of support. So one thing I've noticed about small school districts is they're used to sort of, I wouldn't say they're a well-oiled machine, because I'm finding that there's not necessarily systems in place. They're just people who know what they're doing. They just roll with it. Like when you're tiny and you're in the middle of nowhere, you have to roll with it. And they just have learned to adapt and figure things out and make it happen. Whereas in a big district, and maybe it's just the district that I came from was just like this. There were lots of systems in place. But I think it's easier to create systems when you have one person who does one job. But when you have a small district and many people do many different jobs, and you may have people coming and going and leaving and transitions, then it really just becomes knowledge and second nature, if that makes any sense at all.
Big
sometimes
time.
I get frustrated because, not frustrated, but I'm like, well, don't you have a system in place for this? No, we just do it. But to me, that's exciting because that's an opportunity for me to create some systems.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. So, it becomes, what I discovered was so much of it was institutional knowledge. The HR finance director that I worked with as a superintendent, her name's Martha, absolute rock star. And I think Martha's retiring this year. And she'd been in that role for 34 years when I got there. I mean, she was the keeper of all of the knowledge in the district. And but one of the systems that we started to put in place almost right away, I started noticing with her that yes, she was in charge of HR, yes, she was in charge of finance, but almost everything for purchasing came to her. It wasn't like, you went to the to the secretary at the building. Everything had to come to her. I mean, there was a point in time where she and I finally had a conversation because she was working till 7:38. At night. We were in a 4-day week. Every Friday, she was there basically the entire day. And the issue was she was solving everybody else's problems. And so she needed that time on Friday to do the work she would normally be doing during a week. And that was one of those opportunities for system building where we were able to then push back into the buildings responsibility around purchasing, purchase orders, fulfillment of orders. It didn't have to come to the district office. And I know for her, that was just liberating. There were times where, it'd be, 4:05 on a Thursday, and Martha's like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go watch my grandkid play basketball. And it's like, good. I'm so glad that we've built a system that could support her. But when you think about people like her, and I'm sure you've got a handful in your district too, when the time comes that they do retire or they do step away, because it's so person dependent, it's really important for you to start working on building those systems, because you never know when, that person who has all the knowledge in the district just doesn't come to work the next day.
Yeah. And I've seen how that can affect a district, and it really can instill, it's chaos. It can be chaos. So, I understand why, especially so you talked about how things are already just, what did you call it? Knowledge? You call it institutional knowledge.
Institutional knowledge, yeah.
Institutional knowledge. Yeah. I can see how tiny districts do that, because when you're in a tiny remote district, the people who are often there are people who are generational, have lived there for a long time, stay in the community. So they, you have account clerks and secretaries who've been there for 30 some odd years, and some into their 80s, I'm not kidding, into their 80s, right?
Yeah.
Been there forever. And then in the bigger districts, because they're so large and there's so many buildings and there's so many things to them, you have, and I'm not saying I don't have to have a system. I want to create systems, but they have to have a system, or they just really will not be able to sustain, running. So it's just interesting. And that's the dynamic that I'm seeing, the difference. Really excited about creating systems because it'll make people's lives easier, their jobs easier. And, I think that right now we're in a culture, as an educational system, where we have to be very mindful of creating those systems, because we have a teacher shortage. We have people leaving teaching and education all the time, going into the private sector. So we just really have to be able to make sure that if we lose key people, we have those systems in place so that we can just sustain what we have. That's one of my biggest fears as a superintendent, is making sure that I maintain my staffing, because I'll tell you, in my region, we're one of the few that's fully staffed right now. And I'm going to knock on my door.
Yeah, absolutely. Better knock on wood. Right.
You'll feel very fortunate for that.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting challenges too in small districts. Let's just stay on the small district thing. I think we have enough people out there who listen that are part of small districts, or maybe are in really big districts, and they're like, oh, wow, I had no idea it was like that. I had a very large district superintendent tell me once at one of our state conferences, there was a handful of us sitting around together, and he looked at the 3 or 4 of us who were in really small districts and said, guys, I'll be straight up honest with you. My job is so much easier than yours. He's like, not that I don't work hard, I do, but all the stuff you have to do, mine is very much confined to this, because 80% of what you do, I have people who do that. And, that was just such an interesting challenge. And I guess for me, it was a really great learning point. And this is where I want to go with this. When I transitioned to being the high school principal, I've told this story on the podcast a lot, but, it was my moment of breathing through the snorkel. I just couldn't get my head above water because I thought I had to be everything to everybody. When I transitioned to the superintendent role, at least I had that experience under my belt. So I was able to say, okay, I know I don't have to do it all. There's really good stuff in place. I can't say systems, but there's really good stuff in place. I don't need to come in and change everything. But there was a lot of, how do I do this and how do I do that? Because everything was person-centric. Nobody knew the things the superintendent did. Yes, I could reach out to the state, or I could do this, but nobody knew those things because only the superintendent had done those things. So I was very fortunate. I had a great partner and mentor right there in the county with me, a guy named Frank Reeves, who I think is one of the best people I've ever worked with, who was really great to support me. What kind of support are you getting here in this first year to help you to be successful?
So that's a great question. And I want to start it by saying I was more stressed as a principal, despite having systems and people and working in a larger district, because of, towards the end, we had started to get some coaching, and that was really helpful. And it was a great district. It was just run differently than here. So to come into this and to have all these different roles that I'm responsible for, you would think, I would come in really concerned, worried, but I immediately felt calm because, number one, my regional BOCES director, Dr. Katie Huber, she's amazing. She hooked me up within our regional BOCES with a mentor. And it happened to be someone I knew because I network, and I happened to know him. He was actually at my old school district, and I knew him very well. And she knew that we would connect well. I felt very comfortable reaching out to him. So not only did I have an informal coach through BOCES, but we had regular cabinet meetings. Several of us are new in the region, so we sort of help and coach and mentor each other. But through NISCUS, the New York State Council of Superintendents, I actually got a mentor as well. And the school district thought it was important enough to invest in me to get me a coach. I asked for one. That was really, I was like, I really want to coach. I want to do this the best that I can. I want to learn. I love to learn, right? That's why we're in education. We love learning. And they were like, of course, we want you to be successful. So thinking of it as, you pay a superintendent a lot of money. Coaching is a small investment to help them be successful, which is only going to help your district. So feeling super fortunate. And it's really interesting because, true coaching and mentoring, you learn from each other. And I am so fortunate because my NISCUS coach is Dr. Phyllis Harrington. She's down from Oceanside, Long Island. She is the former president of NISCUS. She knows so much. Very large school district, very different school district. You're talking Margaretville with a $12 million budget, right? That's tiny.
Yeah.
To Oceanside with $100+ million budget.
Right.
And so we were talking budget the other night, and she gives me homework. She gives me little things to do, and she checks my budget spreadsheet, and she's helping me with my presentation. And she's just like, it's so interesting to learn from you and learn how you're doing things. And she'll, it's just nice to know that I have the support, and I think that this is something that's probably, I'm going to guess, a little bit newer of a thing that you'll see all this coaching and this support. Because 20 years ago, you didn't have it. You're just kind of thrown right in and you just figure it out, right? I think about even becoming a teacher. Like, you can go to all the classes you want, but you don't really know the job until you're in the job.
Right.
And I learned so much that first year as a teacher, right? First year as an assistant principal, first year as a principal, and now superintendent. The difference is I've got a lot of support and coaching and mentoring, and it's amazing. And, you talk about
say
social
it
media.
Louder for the people in the back. Please say it louder for the people in the back, because, for me, I've told the story on here, so I won't belabor it. But, me getting a coach as a principal was a complete game changer. I went from the guy breathing through the snorkel to, oh my gosh, I can actually be a leader and not just run around putting out fires. It's why I do what I do now, with coaching principals and coaching, district level teams and so forth, all over the country. I love how you said it. If you're going to invest, whatever you're going to pay somebody, $100, $150, $200,000 a year, plus then factor in all the bennies and all that other stuff that goes with it, you're spending a lot of money on your superintendent. Mm-hmm. You're spending a lot of money on your principals. Why not invest an extra $10,000 to $20,000 a year to ensure that they're going to be successful? Because the cost of replacing a principal, the cost of replacing a superintendent is astronomically higher than that investment you're going to make as a coach. And yes, I know that just sounded like a total shameless plug, but it was, because it works. It matters.
Yeah. Listen, I looked at the statistics. We just got our superintendent survey nationally and, for New York State, and the amount of people leaving the superintendency and leaving leadership positions and leaving just education in general. There's lots of opportunity. So actually now's a really great time to be, to become a leader or an educator. But, you know, I think that if you look at, we talked about the changing of the guard when I was speaking to my district superintendent earlier today. She's like, this is what you're seeing. She's like, we've got a new era where we're just really supporting and learning and leading together, as opposed to, like you said, the shiny shoes and the suit behind closed doors. It's not that anymore. I mean, I make it a part of my day. And this is one of the homework assignments that my coach has given me. And I would have done it anyway, but she, sometimes we get so busy that we get lost in the work and we may find ourselves in our office for way too long. So I schedule, time to get out of my office. Right? It's on my calendar.
I'm fist bumping it right here, folks. You can't see me, but I am like, yes, because that's, preach it. Just keep going. Keep going.
I got this. And sing praises, hallelujah, and an amen, Darrin. So, and it actually, that is what fuels my fire, because you get bogged down. Nobody wants to be in an office all day. At least I don't. That's not why I'm here. So you get bogged down, you get bored. So, I go out and especially the elementary kids, they just really give me life. They just, they see you, they want to hug you all over you. And it just feels great. But so the things that are important to you, that matter to you, they're on your calendar. And maybe that sounds silly, but they're on your calendar.
Oh gosh, no. No, that's exactly how I did it too. And that's what I preach to everybody that I'm coaching too, that, number one, be really crystal clear about what matters to you. And then number two, be really, really intentional. And the way you're intentional is put it on your calendar and make sure everybody knows why it's on your calendar. Just putting it on there is one thing, but then when everybody knows, hey, this is what matters to Michelle, and she's not just talking the talk, she's walking the walk, by being there. There's a couple of groups that I'm coaching that, we're talking about just that time in the classroom, being present in classrooms as school leaders. And turn your radio off when you go in, that walkie-talkie, turn it off. Because if you leave it on, you're saying what's more important is the fire that might happen down at the office versus you being in the classroom. So, that's why I'm just like, I'm going out of my mind here, hearing you talk about put it on the calendar, because it is, to me, that's maybe one of the most important things we can do as leaders, to be intentional about our work. Otherwise, you just leave your day to chance. And I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to ask you another question. If I started my day in my office, it was over. I never would get out. I had to make sure, and for me, 2 buildings as a superintendent, I was out front at the elementary as much as possible, greeting kids. When parents are dropping kids off, I'm greeting kids, greeting parents. Occasionally I'd go over to the high school and do that. But if I started the day in my office, it was over. It was. I was going to go home. I'd look at my Apple Watch, and I would have had, I don't know, like 5 stand hours. Maybe a couple hundred steps, because you just get stuck, right? And
you do.
The more you get out and about,
even if you are well intended, it's just so easy to get. There's always work to do. And that's the other point, right? So there's the work is always going to be there. It's not going anywhere. So don't think you have to stay in your office to get the work done. It's going to be there tomorrow, right? Unless it's a pressing emergency, and very rarely is it, right? One of my things that I always tell everybody, if it ain't fatal, it's no big deal, right? You want to be timely when you want to be timely when you get back to people, and you want to be available, but being available is also being present. So, one of the best mornings I had. So it's really interesting. I don't always greet students at the door. I'm not always, out of my office. I am intentional about getting out of my office, but I do sometimes start my day in my office. But you've made me think, that's a great way to start your day, because it makes you seen and present. And I will tell you, the last basketball game I went to, which was actually last Friday, I went to the varsity boys game. And, the last superintendent for this district was a shared superintendent. So he wasn't, as available. So every time I go, oh, it's so nice to see you. Oh, it's great to see you. It's really great that you're here, and that feels good. That feels good. Yeah. So when people know that you're present and you want to be present and you're there, it just speaks volumes, and that helps you as a leader. So, and it's not just events. It's being in your building or buildings, right? I'm fortunate. I mean, I can do a walkthrough of my whole building in about 15 minutes. That's pretty amazing. And, at least, be seen.
Right.
So just
Yeah.
trying to remember to do that.
So I'm almost going to treat this like a coaching call because I want to push on something that you said. Let's go back. So you're saying, hey, the work will always be there for you. All right. So let's say that I'm a superintendent who really has a hard time letting go of the email. So it's right here on my phone. So, okay, I can go in a classroom, but it's right here on my phone. How do you manage email right now? I'm curious how you're doing that.
Question.
And then we'll see where you're at. Cause then I also might have a suggestion for you. So go ahead, talk to me about email.
So I don't respond right away. I don't respond after hours. So once I've gone home, I've gone home. Whether it's a parent or, if it's an emergency, and I've told this to my leadership team, if it's an emergency, you'll call me. And they have my home number in case I'm away from my phone. Because I don't, even though I say this, and I'm maybe not 100% perfect at practicing this, I always have my phone on me, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm always responding to my phone. I don't respond to emails at night. And if I do want to respond to an email because something's fresh in my head, I'll schedule send. So, because I don't want people to think that you email me and I'm going to get back to you right away, because no, I have a life and that's okay. So for
Absolutely.
me, what's really important for me is work-life balance. As a principal, I didn't have that, and I had to always be available. And part of it was the environment that I worked in, right? Like there were times, and part of that was the pandemic, that we had to be available. There might be a time on the weekend where, like, hey, we're going to hop in on a Zoom call. We're going to talk about whether or not we're going to go to school on Monday because cases are up, right? That's different. But now I don't answer all emails. I do try to, almost before I go to work, almost every day, I try to clean out my inbox, or else it does get to be overwhelming. So I try to clean it out before I leave, but I don't respond. And also it's good to do the 24-hour rule when responding, because sometimes you're heated and you just want to just take a moment.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
absolutely.
But the schedule send is a beautiful thing.
It is. And one of the biggest reasons that I would use it, and I really encouraged my leadership team to do that too, was not only what you said, which is, hey, I'm not always at your disposal, but also the other message there is, I don't expect you to always be at my disposal either.
Yes.
It's definitely, as a leader, it's a great way to model that type of thing. And the suggestion I would have made, you've crushed that, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there anyway for others who are like, oh gosh, give me as much as you can, because the struggle being, chained to my email. This goes back to the calendar. Schedule when you're going to respond to emails. I would put 30 minutes at the end of a day, like the buses roll away. Okay, hey, I got 30 minutes now. I'm going to go actually respond to emails, because then, when I'm in a classroom and an email pops up and, I'm one of those who's tethered to everything with my Apple Watch and my phone and all that kind of stuff. But I know, hey, I put time on my calendar for later today to answer emails. I can allow it to sit there because I know, hey, I'm going to get to that at 4:15. So those are just, again, those things about being really intentional and taking the right steps there. I love the way that you answered that. I think that was just absolutely phenomenal. But now I want to transition a little bit. When you and I talked a week ago, you were sharing with me and I can't remember if you were the one who called them stay interviews or if it was somebody else on social media who's using that phrase, but that's what you're doing right now, these stay interviews with your staff. Talk a little bit about, one, where did the idea come from? And two, what are you learning from that?
Oh, that's awesome. So somebody else on social media said they were doing stay interviews. And I said, oh my gosh, that's what I'm doing. I didn't realize that's what they were. But I mean, I think I had mentioned earlier in the podcast that one of my main concerns is just keeping staff. Not that I'm afraid people are going to leave, but I just know the climate of education right now. So I had my secretary, I said, listen, first of all, she's been here for a while, so she knows people. I wanted to start off with some people who were really going to be honest with me and not be intimidated by being called down to the superintendent's office for a meeting, right? So she put I think I've done 4 or 5 already, and I've got a few more scheduled this week. My goal is to really get through as much staff as I can. I'm calling them in hour time slots just to have a conversation. And it's really, they come in and I'm like, tell me what you love about this district. Tell me what I need to know. Like, I'm sort of like high energy. So they come in and they're like, what's this all about? And, I just kind of throw out a bunch of questions, and then they think for a minute and then they answer. And they have been so honest. The first teacher that I called in was one of my high school teachers upstairs, and he goes, I said, I need you to be completely transparent with me. You don't want me to be transparent, is what he said. I said, no. Yeah. I want you to be transparent. There's nothing that's going to scare me. I love a challenge. I know we've got some work to do. There's a lot of wonderful things about my district, but every district has room to grow, right? And he just laid it out, and it gives me an opportunity to reflect upon what I want to do and how I want to move forward. I'm new. So this first year, I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm going to be listening and observing. And I had a mentor tell me, actually it was an outgoing superintendent. She goes, you don't want to make any decisions that are not wins this year. I said, oh, yeah. Okay. Right. It makes absolute sense. Right. I'm on probation. I'm brand new. So, I thought, okay, that's a great idea. I mean, you really do. I think the first whole year it's learning. There's a big learning curve for me, and just listening and being available. And, I'm big on empathy, being an empathetic leader, especially coming out of the pandemic. And then some of my own personal experiences have created in me to have that mindset. But I'm just learning what they need, what they desire, what they want. And sometimes what they want is not what they need. But, right. Just being available. And what I'm learning is that they are appreciating it. I think they're appreciating it. That's the impression that I'm getting. And we're having honest conversations. Some of the conversations are about things that are wonderful to hear. I'm hearing a lot of we have really great students here, but then I'll hear things about, I'm the only one who ever calls kids out on cell phones and hats. Nobody else does. And it's really frustrating. And I'm just getting sick of it. All those things that every school has the same problem. But right. I'm just learning about them as people and getting to know them. And for me, that's really important. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here. Like I said already, it's a small district. I am a people person. I'm social. I want to get to know people. With that being said, I know that not everybody's going to like me, but that's okay too. I want them to think that at least I have integrity and I'm fair. Right. So, absolutely. It's really just about learning about them and what I can do to help facilitate growth in the school community and help support them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you're doing what I think are the most important things, and that's investing in your human capital. One of my very favorite people on the planet, fantastic speaker, Jostens Renaissance Ambassador, Dr. Phil Campbell says, everyone wants to be seen and heard and loved. And that's what you're doing, is creating that opportunity for them to be seen, for them to be heard, and you're setting up the conditions where they feel like they're loved right there in the district, or continue to be loved, because I'm sure a lot of them have been there for a long time. You're the new person. They're kind of still waiting. We're recording this in January. We're still learning. We're still, how much can we trust Michelle? That type of thing. But is really important. It's really powerful that you're doing that work. There's one other thing I want to touch on before we go to our last question. And I probably should have told you I was going to ask you this question. But when we had our last conversation, you shared with me something that I thought was really powerful, and you can talk about it as little or as much as you want. Just you being an advocate for students, and specifically the story you had told me. I'm sure you know which story I'm talking about a young man who was expelled from a different district, and some behaviors there, and how you were able to interact and actually build a relationship with this young man.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite stories, and I'm still close to his family, and I don't mind talking about it because I think it's really important, because it has to do with, you and I talked about this a little bit, about also civil discourse, and just sending the message to students. I really don't believe in suspension. I don't believe in punishment per se. I really believe in changing behavior. A student who, Can I say it? Can I just go tell the story? I'm going to tell the story.
Yeah, tell the story.
Yeah. So, there was a social media post that a student had done, and it was racially derived, and it was really talking about harming a person of color. And it was egregious. He was expelled from school, and a lot of hate came his way. So, I am a social justice advocate. I'm the vice president nominated for the local NAACP here in our local area. And so when it comes to children, especially, I just feel like we can never give up on kids. I hate the message that we send when a student misbehaves and we expel them or suspend them from school, because that tells them that we don't want them. And this young man made a really poor choice of words, real poor choice of actions, I should say. So it's hard for me to talk about it. But anyway, hard in the fact that not everybody will understand why I did what I did. But he said that he was going to harm a person of color. Essentially, like, this is what we do to Black people when they don't do the right thing. And, he shot a gun, and it was posted on social media. So I share that because it's public knowledge. But what I did next was what some people would disagree with. And I had reached out to him and his family because I really felt like, what makes a child feel this much hate towards another group of people, right? Many things. Maybe the way they were brought up, maybe the media, maybe because he lives in rural upstate New York where he doesn't see any people of color, and all he sees is what's on the media, and it might be negative, right? So I reached out to the family, and what really happened is what I think is magical. I reached out to his mom. She was shocked that I reached out to her. And she was trying to get him to go back to school and trying to get the school to allow him back in. And what happened was we became friendly. I had series of meetings with him, series of meetings with her. He was like, Mom, she's really great. She's nice. Why is she doing this? And it was just because I wanted to sort of get in his head, and I wanted to change his mindset on what he thought a person of color was like, namely Black people. And we discovered we had so much in common, and we really weren't that different. And my hope was that I would change his mind about how he felt towards people of color. And I think I did that. We still talk. I sent them a Christmas card. They sent me a Christmas card. I have plans, to see his mom. And that just to me feels good, because I could have changed something that could have been a really horrible situation. He was expelled from school. They never let him back in. And here's how I know the relationship with me and them was authentic. Nobody knows that they talked to me. He could have pled his case. He could have said, listen, I'm working with the NAACP. I'm trying to change, to change my trajectory. Yeah. I want to come back to school, take me back. But I feel like our relationship is authentic because he didn't use that. He's in a trade right now. He's moving on with his life. His mom and I still talk. We're still friends. She's actually invited me to go horseback riding. I love horses. She has horses. It's about relationships, right? So those are the types of things and types of relationships I would try to build within my school community and outside of my school community, because I believe in people. I believe in leading with love. I believe in giving second chances, and I believe in empathy. And no 15-year-old child wants to do harm unless they've either been harmed or had some type of experience that you need to be able to tap and change and get them to see a different way. So it was just about taking the time to get to know them and them getting to know me. And I hope that interaction has at least changed his mindset on what he thinks about people of color. I think it did. And I would do it again. My own son was like, Mom, you don't know anything about this family. What if he wants to hurt you? What if he wants to? And I guess I just felt so compelled because it's a child, right? You don't give up on kids. I mean, that's why we're here. We don't give up on kids. And I'm here to tell you that it had an impact. I think that I'm going to be able to go fishing with him next summer, and we're going to have a great time. And that's a small little change that can lead to big things, eventually. And we have to remember those things. If I can make that kind of relationship, if I can foster that type of relationship with a kid who did something like that, then I'm hoping that I can instill that upon my teachers when they make judgments, presumptions about students who don't do their work, who fight back, who maybe seem to be lazy. Kids have so much baggage and so much stuff going on that we just have to maybe not take it personally and be able to get to know them and find things in common with them so that we can change the trajectory of their lives.
There you go. Education is not just about math and science and reading and that kind of thing. It's about educating a human being. We're in the people business, and I'm grateful for you sharing that story with us. I felt really powerful about it the first time I heard you tell it, and I feel even more powerful about it the second time hearing you tell that story. So thank you for sharing that, Michelle. Let's move on to the final question here on the show. The same question I ask everybody here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. What right now, aside from all this great stuff that you have shared throughout the course of this particular episode, what, Michelle, are you doing right now to lean into leadership?
Boy, I think the most important thing for me right now as a leader is to know that I get it, that I understand. So being vulnerable and admitting what I maybe don't know. I think one of the most powerful things that we can do as a leader is build trust. And you build trust by really not just beating around the bush. If I don't know something, I'm going to find out how to do it. If I'm not sure, I'm going to ask somebody. And just being vulnerable, sharing that story with you. You're the first person I told outside of really close friends and family that story. And I felt really comfortable talking about it again now because I think it's important. I think it's important for people to hear. So being vulnerable and sharing of myself, and sometimes that's successes, sometimes that's failures. And that's okay because I think that makes us human. I can't say it enough. I'm not just that person in shiny shoes. I have patent leather shoes on, by the way, today. So you must have channeled me somehow. And I always wear a blazer. I like to dress the part. But I also like people to know that I'm real and I'm approachable and I'm vulnerable.
I really appreciate you coming on to the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. Michelle, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much. And
Thank you
I hope the rest
me.
of the year just continues to be amazing. I'm looking forward to meeting you in March. I get to meet you in person at NISCUS.
I can't wait. I'm going to be that crazy stalker lady. I'm going to be like, remember me? We did the podcast. Here it is, Michelle.
That's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Awesome. Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Darrin.
Oh, so much goodness right there in that interview with Michelle Osterhoudt. Again, I really appreciate her coming on the show, and I really appreciate the story that she shared with us. Talk about never giving up on a kid. Michelle's somebody who in that situation could have had every reason to give up on that child, but instead she found a way to form a relationship and to make a difference in the life of someone else. And folks, that's what it's all about. That's what we should be all about. It's always take the opportunity that we have to make a difference in the life of a kid. And now it's time for today's pep talk. So this is the time of year when people start looking for that next challenge. They start looking for the next job, whether that's leaping out of the classroom and into administration for the first time, or perhaps you're in some type of an administration or leadership role and you're looking at the next challenge. What is that next opportunity for you? I want to share 3 things that I think you should consider as you begin venturing down this road into potentially that next job. Number 1, I want to start with just remind yourself to be grateful. Be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for the opportunities that you have had, even if the situation that you're in right now isn't necessarily the most positive situation. Be grateful for everything that you have learned in that situation. We can learn a lot from negative situations just as much as we can from positive ones. Number 2, be mindful of fit. When you're looking for that next role, you want to consider, how does this fit my goals? How does this fit my family? And how do I potentially fit in this particular community? I've changed jobs a couple of different times in my career. One time, I think the move was an incredible fit. The second time, I would tell you it wasn't as good a fit as I would have hoped it would be. So really be mindful of fit. Think about how your values connect to the values of that community, not just about how you fit in the school. And then number 3, think about the long term. What is the long-term goal that you have? Are you thinking that this next job is going to be the one that you finish your career in? Or is this going to be something that can be a stepping stone, something that you can learn from and grow from, and has opportunity for you to do exactly that, learn and grow? So think about the long-term impact of the decision you might make. Oftentimes, and I'm talking to you first-time early career leaders, we want to jump on the first opportunity we get. But it's not always necessarily the right one. So again, remember to give yourself that opportunity to be grateful for what you have. Remember to be mindful about the fit and make sure you're thinking about the long term. Thank you so much for joining me this week on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. Get out there, have a road to awesome day. Thank you for listening to the Leaning Into Leadership podcast, brought to you by Road to Awesome. Don't forget, click subscribe, give a review, and share this with somebody who might also enjoy leaning into leadership.